I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am. My name is Wesley Crawford, and this is how my world turned upside down. I've been married to Autumn for 7 years, and until recently, I thought we had a pretty good life together. We weren't rich by any means. I work as a mechanic at a local garage, and she's a receptionist at a dental office. We live in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Minneapolis, but we made it our home. Autumn has always been beautiful in my eyes. Her auburn hair falls just past her shoulders in natural waves, and her hazel eyes have this way of lighting up when she laughs. She's petite, barely reaching my shoulders, but she's always had this presence about her that fills up any room she walks into. When we first met at a mutual friend's barbecue, I was instantly drawn to her infectious laugh and the way she made everyone around her feel special. The first signs that something was off started about 4 months ago. Autumn had always gone out with her girlfriends, usually once a month on a Friday night. It was her way of unwinding, and I never had any issues with it. But then these girls' nights started becoming more frequent, twice a month, then weekly. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, everyone needs their social life, right? But then I noticed other changes, small things at first. She started paying more attention to her appearance, not just for work or special occasions, but for these nights out. New clothes started appearing in her closet. Nothing too flashy, but definitely more revealing than her usual style. She began spending more time at the gym, which wouldn't have been suspicious on its own, but combined with everything else, it made me wonder. Our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly lady who's lived in the building for decades, mentioned seeing Autumn coming home later, and later from these nights out. "Wesley, dear," she said one morning while I was getting the mail, "is everything okay with you two? I saw Autumn coming in at 3 a.m. last weekend, and she seemed, well, not herself." The text messages started becoming more frequent too. She'd be glued to her phone, smiling at the screen, but the moment I'd walk near, she'd quickly lock it and put it face down. When I asked who she was texting, it was always just the girls or work stuff. We used to share everything, but now there were these invisible walls going up between us. One particular Tuesday evening, I was fixing dinner, something I'd started doing more often since Autumn began coming home later from work, when she announced she was going out that Friday. "The girls want to try this new place downtown," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. It was the third weekend in a row, and something in her voice sounded different. "Again?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Didn't you just go out last Friday?" She got defensive immediately. "What, I'm not allowed to have friends now? You spend plenty of time with your buddies at the garage." That wasn't true, and we both knew it. I'd actually been spending more time at home, hoping to salvage whatever was happening to our relationship. The way she turned it around on me, making me feel guilty for asking a simple question, that was new too. I started noticing other changes in our daily life. The casual kisses goodbye became shorter, more perfunctory. Our conversations over dinner, when we actually ate together, felt forced and superficial. She stopped asking about my day or sharing stories about hers. The comfortable silence we used to share was replaced by an awkward tension that felt like a third person in the room. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up with a message. I'm not proud of it, but I glanced at the screen. The name that popped up wasn't one of her usual girlfriends. It was someone named Kai. The message preview only showed, "Can't wait for Friday." Before the screen went dark again, my stomach churned. Who was Kai? She'd never mentioned that name before. That night, lying in bed next to her, listening to her steady breathing, I couldn't sleep. The distance between us in our queen-sized bed felt like miles. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above us, wondering when exactly things had started to change, and more importantly, why. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? Or was it something or someone else entirely? Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a story that would completely reshape my life, and everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and betrayal. The next few weeks became an exercise in self-doubt and growing paranoia. Every time Autumn's phone buzzed, my heart would skip a beat. I found myself watching her reactions, noting how her face would light up at certain messages, while barely acknowledging others. The name Kai kept appearing more frequently, though she never mentioned him. I had checked her phone's lock screen enough times to know it was a him. One morning, while Autumn was getting ready for work, I noticed something different about her routine. She was taking extra care with her appearance, something she typically reserved for special occasions or her girls' nights out. But this was just a regular Wednesday. She wore a new blouse I'd never seen before, emerald green, bringing out the golden flecks in her hazel eyes. Her makeup was more elaborate than usual, and she'd curled her auburn hair instead of wearing it in her typical messy bun. "Big meeting today?" I asked casually, leaning against the bathroom doorframe. She jumped slightly, nearly smudging her mascara. "Oh, no, just felt like making an effort today." Her eyes met mine in the mirror for a brief moment before darting away. That same day, I decided to surprise her at lunch. I'd never done this before. Our workplaces were usually too far apart, but something compelled me to make the 30-minute drive to her dental office. When I arrived, the other receptionist, Jenny, gave me an odd look. "Autumn's at lunch," she said, fidgeting with a pen. "She usually goes to that new cafe down the street." I found the cafe easily enough. Through the large window, I spotted her sitting at a corner table, but she wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man I'd never seen before. He was younger than me, probably in his early 30s, with styled dark hair and the kind of confident posture that comes from spending time at the gym. They were leaning close, talking intently, and I watched as he reached across the table to touch her hand. My blood ran cold. I wanted to burst in there to demand answers, but something held me back. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a picture. Evidence of what I'd seen. Proof that I wasn't going crazy. That evening, Autumn came home later than usual. "Busy day at work," she said, barely looking at me as she headed straight for the shower. I noticed she'd changed clothes since lunch. The emerald blouse was gone, replaced by a plain white t-shirt I recognized from her office's spare clothes stash. The next day, I did something I'm not proud of. I went through her phone while she was in the shower. She'd changed her password, but I'd seen her type it in enough times to figure it out. What I found made my stomach turn. The conversations with Kai were deleted, but there were other signs. Photos I'd never seen. Calendar entries for work meetings that coincided with her late returns home, and a separate Instagram account I didn't know existed. The following Friday, she was getting ready for another girls' night. I watched as she slipped into a black dress I'd never seen before, applied her favorite perfume, the one she used to save for our date nights, and spent extra time on her makeup. "Where are you meeting the girls tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, that new place on Washington Avenue," she replied, focusing intently on applying her lipstick. "Sarah's been dying to try it." I knew she was lying. Earlier that day, I'd texted Sarah, pretending to plan a surprise for Autumn. Sarah's response: "Sorry, Wesley. I'm out of town this weekend for my sister's baby shower." As Autumn grabbed her purse to leave, I noticed something fall from it, a small piece of paper. After she left, I picked it up. It was a receipt from a hotel bar, dated 2 weeks ago, during another supposed girls' night. The evidence was mounting, but I needed to be certain. I couldn't confront her with just suspicions and circumstantial evidence. I needed proof that would make it impossible for her to deny what was happening. So I made a decision. Next Friday, I would follow her. That week was torture. We moved around each other like ghosts in our apartment, speaking only when necessary. She didn't seem to notice how much I was hurting, or if she did, she didn't care. The Autumn I knew, the one who used to curl up next to me on the couch and tell me about every little detail of her day. The one who would leave silly notes in my lunchbox. The one who used to look at me like I was her whole world. That Autumn was gone. Instead, I lived with a stranger who wore my wife's face, but held secrets behind her eyes. Every smile felt forced, every kiss mechanical, every "I love you" hollow. The weight of unspoken words and hidden truths hung heavy in our home, making it hard to breathe. As Friday approached, I prepared myself for what I might discover. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the truth, but I knew I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. Something had to give, and soon it would. Friday arrived with a weight of anticipation that made my hands shake as I got ready for work. I had already planned everything. I'd borrowed my friend Mike's car, a nondescript gray Honda that Autumn wouldn't recognize. I told her I had to work late at the garage, which wasn't unusual for a Friday. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I needed answers. I parked Mike's car across the street from our apartment building at 6 p.m., waiting. Mrs. Patterson, bless her heart, had agreed to text me when she saw Autumn leave. The old lady had become my unexpected ally in this situation, her concern for our marriage evident in her worried eyes whenever we spoke. At 7:30, my phone buzzed. "She just left, dear. Black dress, high heels. Got into a rideshare car." I started the engine, my heart pounding as I followed the car at a safe distance. To my surprise, they didn't head downtown where the usual girls' nights took place. Instead, the car took her to a modest restaurant in a quieter part of town. Through the restaurant's large windows, I watched as she walked in, her auburn hair catching the warm lighting inside. She moved with a confidence I hadn't seen at home in months, scanning the room until her face lit up with that smile, the one that used to be mine. And there he was, Kai, standing up from a corner booth to greet her. I sat in Mike's car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, watching as they ordered drinks, leaned in close to talk and laughed together. He reached across the table several times to touch her hand, and she didn't pull away. The intimacy of their interactions was unmistakable. This wasn't their first meeting, not by a long shot. After dinner, they left together in his car, a modest Volkswagen that had seen better days. I followed them to a small bar across town, where they met up with another couple. My stomach churned as I realized these people knew about their relationship. How long had they been covering for her? How many people knew about this betrayal, while I remained oblivious? I parked and managed to slip into the bar unnoticed, choosing a dark corner where I could observe them. Autumn was different here, more animated, more tactile. She sat close to Kai, his arm casually draped around her shoulders as if it belonged there. The way she looked at him, It was the way she used to look at me. My phone buzzed, a text from Autumn. Work's really busy tonight. Might be home late. Don't wait up. Another lie to add to the growing pile. I watched as she typed it, saw her slight frown as she hit send, then immediately turned back to Kai with a smile. The other couple left around midnight, but Autumn and Kai stayed. They moved to the bar, where he whispered something in her ear that made her laugh and playfully swat his arm. My wife, my Autumn, was performing in a play I hadn't known was running, playing a role I never thought she'd take. The other woman. Around 1 a.m., they left the bar together. I followed them to an apartment complex about 20 minutes away. Definitely not the upscale place I'd imagined when I first suspected she was seeing someone else. It was similar to our own building, maybe even a bit more run down. They disappeared inside together, and I sat in the car, feeling numb. I waited for 2 hours, hoping against hope that she'd come out quickly, that this wasn't what it looked like. But when she finally emerged at 3 a.m., her hair messed up and her makeup smudged, there was no more room for doubt. Kai walked her to her waiting rideshare car, kissing her goodbye in a way that spoke of familiarity and passion. As I drove home, the evidence I'd gathered felt like lead in my pocket. Photos from my phone, the restaurant receipt I'd found, and now the address of Kai's apartment. But the heaviest burden was the memory of how happy she looked with him. Happier than she'd been with me in months. Back in our apartment, I sat in the dark living room waiting. When she finally came home at 3:45 a.m., she tried to sneak in quietly. I heard her kick off her heels, heard the familiar rustle of her putting her purse down, heard her pause when she noticed the living room light click on. "Wesley? Why are you still up?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of panic she couldn't quite hide. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and wondered how we'd gotten here. How the woman I'd promised to love forever had become a stranger wearing the face of someone I used to know. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. "Hey, how long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. Autumn stood frozen in the doorway, her hazel eyes wide with recognition. The game was up. "Wesley, I can explain," she started, but I cut her off. "How long have you been seeing Kai?" The sound of his name made her flinch. I pulled out my phone and started showing her the photos I'd taken throughout the evening. The restaurant, the bar, his apartment. Which part would you like to explain first? She sank into the armchair across from me, her black dress riding up slightly, her carefully styled hair now disheveled. The perfume I'd bought her last Christmas mixed with the smell of alcohol and something else. Someone else. 3 months, she whispered, staring at her hands. It's been 3 months. The confession hit me like a physical blow. 3 months. 12 weeks of lies. 90 days of betrayal. I thought back to all the girls' nights, all the late work meetings, all the times she'd kiss me goodbye while heading to him. "I met him at the gym," she continued, words tumbling out now. "He's a personal trainer there. It wasn't supposed to. I never meant for..." "For what?" I demanded, my composure finally cracking. "You never meant for me to find out. Never meant to destroy our marriage." Which part wasn't supposed to happen, Autumn? She started crying, mascara running down her cheeks. Once upon a time, the sight of her tears would have broken my heart, would have made me rush to comfort her. Now, they just made me angry. "He made me feel alive again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've become so Comfortable, Wesley. So routine. When was the last time we did anything exciting? When was the last time you looked at me the way he does? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So this is my fault? Because I worked hard to provide for us? Because I thought we were building a life together? No, it's not that simple, she protested. Kai he understands me. He's spontaneous. He's younger? I finished for her. He's new. He doesn't have a mortgage to worry about or a future to plan. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a car alarm went off somewhere in the distance. Inside, our marriage was crumbling in real time. I need to know everything, I said finally. Every detail. Every lie. I deserve that much. For the next hour, Autumn talked. She told me about their first conversation at the gym, how he'd offered to help her with her form, how coffee after workouts turned into lunch dates, how the first kiss happened in his car after a rainstorm caught them leaving the gym, how one thing led to another, and suddenly, she was living a double life. She told me about the other couple at the bar, his friends who'd been covering for them, about the nights spent in his apartment, the promises he'd made, the future he'd painted. With each revelation, another piece of my world fell away. Does he know you're married? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yes, she admitted. He says I deserve better, that I deserve to be happy. And were you planning to tell me? Or just keep lying until... What? Until you'd figured out how to leave. Until you'd secured your backup plan. She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. I stood up, walking to the window. The city was starting to wake up, the first hints of dawn painting the sky a sickly gray. Our wedding photo still sat on the windowsill, autumn in white, both of us laughing, full of hope for the future. I turned it face down. I want you to leave, I said, still looking out the window. Not forever, not yet. That's a bigger conversation. But right now, I can't look at you. Pack what you need for a few days and go. Wesley, please, she started, but I held up my hand. Go to him, I said, finally turning to face her. Go to your spontaneous, exciting, new life. But remember this moment, Autumn. Remember that you didn't just cheat on me. You chose to break us. Whatever happens next, that's on you. She stood slowly, her legs shaking. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something more. But instead, she walked to our bedroom. I listened as she packed a bag, as she changed her clothes, as she moved around the space we'd shared for 7 years like a thief in the night. When she finally left, the click of the door closing felt like the period at the end of a chapter. I sat alone in our apartment, my apartment now, as the sun rose over Minneapolis, illuminating the ruins of what I'd thought was a happy marriage. The days following Autumn's departure blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and mechanical routines. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, unable to face the prospect of fixing other people's problems when my own life lay in pieces. The apartment felt impossibly large and eerily quiet without her presence. On the 3rd day, her sister Charlotte showed up at my door. Unlike Autumn's fiery personality, Charlotte had always been the calm, rational one. She stood in my living room, looking at the mess I'd let accumulate. Takeout containers, unwashed clothes, and empty coffee cups telling the story of my deteriorating state. She's staying with him, Charlotte said without preamble. I thought you should hear it from family rather than through the grapevine. She paused, then added, I told her she's making a huge mistake. I appreciated Charlotte's honesty, but it didn't lessen the sting. Did you? No, I asked, watching her face carefully. About Kai? No, she replied firmly. None of us did. Mom and Dad are devastated. They keep asking what went wrong, how their daughter could do this to someone they consider a son. The mention of Autumn's parents hit hard. They'd always treated me like their own, had been proud when I'd worked my way up to head mechanic at the garage. Now I wondered if I'd lose them too in the fallout of this disaster. Over the next few weeks, Autumn made several attempts to contact me. Text messages asking to talk, voicemails filled with tears and apologies. Even a handwritten letter slipped under the door. Each time, I maintained my silence. What was there to say? How do you have a conversation with someone who rewrote your entire history together? The truth started spreading through our social circle like wildfire. Friends took sides, as they often do in these situations. Most stood by me, shocked by Autumn's actions. A few, particularly her gym friends, defended her right to find happiness. The betrayal deepened as I discovered how many people had known about her affair and chosen to keep it hidden. One evening, about a month after she left, I ran into them at the grocery store. They were shopping together, looking domestic and comfortable, like any normal couple. Autumn's face went pale when she saw me, while Kai, seeing me in person for the first time, had the audacity to pull her closer protectively. I abandoned my half-filled cart and left without buying anything. That night, in a moment of weakness, I finally read her letter. In it, she tried to explain how she'd felt trapped in our routine, how she'd lost herself somewhere along the way. She wrote about how Kai had awakened something in her she thought was dead. But what struck me most was her admission that she'd started therapy, claiming she needed to understand why she'd destroyed something good for the excitement of something new. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she wrote, but I need you to know that what I did says more about my brokenness than it does about your worth. The words rang hollow. Her attempt at self-awareness didn't erase the nights I lay awake, wondering if every memory we'd shared had been tainted by her capacity for deception. It didn't erase the way I now questioned every happy moment, wondering if she'd been thinking of him even then. Mrs. Patterson continued to be an unexpected source of support, bringing me home-cooked meals and sharing stories of her own divorce 40 years ago. The pain doesn't go away, she told me one evening, but it changes shape. Eventually, it becomes something you can carry without breaking. I threw myself into work, taking extra shifts at the garage. Physical labor provided a temporary escape from the thoughts that plagued me. The repetitive motion of fixing broken things gave me a sense of control I desperately needed. If only human relationships could be repaired as easily as engines. Autumn's things still occupied half our closet. Her toiletries still cluttered the bathroom counter. I couldn't bring myself to pack them up, but I couldn't stand looking at them either. They were physical reminders of the life we'd shared, now tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal. One Saturday morning, Charlotte came by again, this time to collect some of Autumn's clothes. As she packed, she hesitated by the door. "She's not happy, you know," she said quietly. "She's realizing that excitement isn't the same as love." I looked at her, feeling suddenly very tired. "That's not my problem anymore," I replied. "She made her choice." As Charlotte left with Autumn's belongings, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it was the sight of my wife's clothes leaving our home, or maybe it was just time doing its work. But I realized I needed to make a choice too. I could either let this betrayal define me, or I could use it as a catalyst for change. That evening, I sat down at our small kitchen table and began writing. Not to Autumn, but to myself. I wrote about what I wanted for my future, about the kind of person I wanted to be on the other side of this pain. It was time to start thinking about what came next. 6 months after Autumn walked out of our apartment and into Kai's arms, I found myself sitting in my lawyer's office, finalizing our divorce papers. The process had been surprisingly civil. Perhaps guilt made Autumn more amenable to my terms. She didn't fight for the apartment or contest the division of assets. In the end, untangling 7 years of marriage came down to signatures on dotted lines and the sharp bang of a notary's stamp. The day before the final hearing, I received an unexpected text from Kai's ex-girlfriend. She'd heard about our situation through mutual acquaintances and wanted to meet. Over coffee, she told me a story that felt eerily familiar. How Kai had pursued her while she was in a relationship. How he'd made her feel special and understood. How he'd convinced her that her stable relationship was actually a prison. 3 months after she left her boyfriend for him, Kai had grown distant, eventually moving on to someone new. "He's like a drug," she explained. "The high is incredible, but the crash is devastating." I didn't tell Autumn about this meeting. It wouldn't change anything, and I'd stopped feeling responsible for protecting her from her choices. Besides, I'd heard through Charlotte that cracks were already showing in their relationship. The excitement of forbidden love had faded, replaced by the very routine Autumn had tried to escape. Karma, as they say, works in mysterious ways. The changes in my life weren't all negative. I'd used the past months to focus on personal growth. I joined a support group for people dealing with infidelity, where I met others who understood the unique pain of betrayal. Their stories helped me realize that Autumn's actions reflected her own issues, not my worthiness of love. I also made some practical changes. I took the promotion at work I'd been hesitating about, which meant more responsibility, but also better pay. I started taking night classes in business management, thinking about opening my own garage someday. The future I'd planned with Autumn was gone, but a new one was taking shape. Mrs. Patterson remained a constant support, and her friendship helped fill some of the loneliness. She introduced me to her granddaughter, Rachel, who had recently moved to Minneapolis. While I wasn't ready for dating, it was nice to have conversations with someone who didn't know my story, who saw me as I was now, rather than as Autumn's betrayed husband. The final divorce hearing arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The irony of the season wasn't lost on me. Autumn looked different than the last time I'd seen her. The confident glow she'd had with Kai had dimmed, replaced by dark circles under her eyes, and a nervous energy I recognized from our early dating days. She tried to catch my eye several times during the proceedings, but I kept my gaze forward, focused on the judge. When it was over, she caught up to me in the courthouse parking lot. "Wesley, wait," she called. I turned, more out of habit than desire to talk. She stood there, twisting her hands together, looking small in the oversized blazer she wore. I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. The woman I'd fallen in love with, the one I'd built dreams with, was still there somewhere beneath the choices she'd made. But she wasn't mine anymore, and surprisingly, that realization didn't hurt as much as it once had. "I know you are," I said quietly. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Autumn. I really do." As I drove home from the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. The wedding ring I'd finally removed left a pale band on my finger, a reminder of what had been, but like a bone that breaks and heals stronger at the point of fracture, I knew I was stronger for having survived this. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sun set over Minneapolis. Mrs. Patterson had left her signature chicken casserole at my door, and Rachel had texted to check how the hearing went. Life was moving forward, bringing new possibilities I couldn't have imagined 6 months ago. The story of my marriage's end would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. In the end, Autumn's girls' night out had turned into something more. Not just an affair that destroyed our marriage, but a catalyst for change that forced me to rebuild myself from the ground up. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed all along. Sometimes, the best endings are really beginnings in disguise. As I watched the city lights come alive against the darkening sky, I finally felt ready for whatever beginning came next.